So first of all, of course, thanks for this fantastic opportunity to speak at this Economist event, and also thanks, of course, to our Greek partners, as you know, the original Olympic country. It's a pleasure actually to present on the topic prevention of the manipulation of competitions, or match fixing, as you said yourself, Mr. Andrews. Now, I first maybe start with giving a bit background information, who we are, how we are doing, what we are doing. I'm not fully certain if my presentation can be used or not. Either way, it will work, because I want to make it a little bit different. There it is, the presentation. Okay. So first of all, please directly go to the next slide. To explain a bit where we are coming from. So as Mr. Andrews said, this is a relatively long name, the Olympic Movement Unit on the Prevention of the Manipulation of Competitions. We are already pretty well known within the Olympic movement, so at international sports federations, but also NOCs, as the OM unit PMC. And right here on the right side on this slide, you see that we just successfully negotiated to have a set budget for the coming Olympiads of 10 million. So that money divided by 4 is our budget to work against the big problem of match fixing, which might be connected to sports betting. Who we are, please, next slide. Just to share 2 further sentences with you. So we are a unit which is internal to the IOC, but we are working for the full Olympic movement. So what we are doing work-wise on the phenomenon of match fixing for the international federations and NOCs and multi-sports events organizers, as you will see in my quick presentation, is happening from inside the Olympic House, from inside the IOC for the whole Olympic movement, but on the budget of the whole Olympic movement. Now, before going into the structure of what we call a 3-pillar approach, I just want to make a very hands-on distinction to what has been discussed before, actually in the presentations, in the 2 presentations before this panel, anti-doping and also safeguarding. So the same as Alex said in his discussion with Mr. Andrews before is true for match fixing. There is no global body as WADA is for anti-doping for the fight of anti-match fixing. So we are checking compliance. We are also helping IFs in cases in the follow-up, as you will also hear from my colleague Benjamin Schindler from FIBA a bit later. So this is one distinction. And another distinction, and I want to point out that very clearly compared to the fight of ITA and WADA anti-doping wise, is the strict and direct liability in doping, which is quite clear and quite simple, if you allow me to say, to clarify at least this liability. It's always the athlete. If a substance is found in his body, then there is this notion of strict liability. This is not the case in anti-match fixing causes. In cases of sports betting manipulation, it's rather complex to clear from the get-go. Balance of probabilities we are having, I will talk a bit in a few slides. So this slide, just to give you a very basic understanding of how we are going into safeguarding clean athletes and clean competitions, which is also, by the way, a part of the Olympic agenda, recommendation 5. So how we are doing it? First, we call it Pillar 1, regulation and legislation, which is we created regulations sort of very similar to the World Anti-Doping Code, which I will talk about later, and we check the compliance of the stakeholders within the Olympic movement for that. Pillar 2, as we all also heard in already some panels today, education. So the sports persons, of course, first and foremost, the athletes, the entourage, but also on the level of officials, and talking to the stakeholders of the Olympic movement, again, international federations and NOCs, to raise awareness and to educate about the topic, and to, I think also Alex said it before, maybe it was Valerie, this is the creation of respectful environment and of a notion of respect within the sporting movement. Capacity building is also a part of Pillar 2, and this is what we also heard before when we talked about the different aspects. This is the collaboration and cooperation with external stakeholders to the Olympic movement. So this is law enforcement agencies, Interpol. We have a capacity building program almost since 10 years, where we raise awareness for the issue around the world, and also with countries, law enforcement specific, the law enforcement in specific countries, Europol. Also, you see here UNODC. I could have added the Council of Europe and the EU Commission. We work with all those external stakeholders to the Olympic movement. Pillar 3, I will talk a bit about this later in more detail. This is the exchange of intelligence, which is very important if it comes to the phenomenon of sports betting fixing, and I will explain what the IOC has done for the Olympic movement. Next slide, please. So here, that is Pillar 1 in a bit more detail. Don't want to spend too much time on here, but there is something called the Olympic Movement Code on the prevention of manipulation of competitions. This is part of the Olympic Charter since 2015, and since then legally binding for all international federations who are part of the Olympic program. And my unit, my small unit within the Olympic House in Lausanne, is making sure that these stakeholders, international federations and NOCs, are implementing this Olympic Movement Code on their level. We had an update. I could go into detail, but as Benjamin explained before, Benjamin Cohen explained before, for the World Anti-Doping Code, the same happens on this code. So every once in a while it is updated. The last update happened in 2022. On the right below, bottom side, you see something very important to me. We have also heard, I think Irina was a part in a discussion before from the Council of Europe. So we, the IOC, have been working on creating the Maconon Convention, the only legally binding international document talking about match fixing, and we, the sport movement now, have been the first entity, if you want, to not only sign this, but to ratify this and make and implement the Maconon Convention as the Olympic Movement Code for the sports movement. Next slide, please. This just shows you a little bit about Pillar 2, but the connection to Pillar 1. So in order to talk to athletes and sports persons about how to be compliant to the code, and what do I have to do in order to be compliant to the code and not breach sporting rules, this is how we communicate to athletes and sports persons during main events. We just came back from the Youth Olympic Games in South Korea, and of course there's this little event, Summer Olympics, coming up. We will also be there, and also pre the Olympic Games. We will talk to athletes using webinar styles, using physical booth style at events, and talk to them about what do I have to do. And I always say, when we talk to athletes, the important rule is, if if you are accredited at the Olympic Games, if you're going to a world championship of your international federation, do not bet on anything happening at this event. Then you are safe. Of course, it goes deeper. Then we talk about match fixing in Rule 2. Then we talk about not sharing inside information, and we also share about the reporting obligation. But these are detailed questions who come up in a discussion during a webinar, during a booth. Next slide, please. So this is showing you a little bit about Pillar 3. So what we have, again, not to go into detail, we are easily reachable, and we will have a discussion afterwards if I'm correct also. So just to give you a brief view into how we are looking at the problem of how do we organize the exchange of intelligence, how do we investigate. I just want to mention that on the one side, of course, we are fully monitoring the IOC events, the Olympic Games, the Youth Olympic Games, and you will see in some further slides also how we do it in the build-up to Paris. Then in the middle, you see SALT, and excuse me to have another acronym, because you must be hearing a lot of acronyms today. It's called EBIS. It's the Integrity Betting Intelligence System, which is a platform, just for you to know, where we link to external stakeholders to the Olympic movement, which means sports betting operators, private, public, this is a discussion in itself, but sports betting entities, we are trying to be linked to them directly, either through regulating entities. So I'm just coming back from a big conference in London where we talked to global regulating entities who have knowledge about what is happening, or should have, if I might say so, information about what's happening sports betting wise, so we get informed if there is any irregularity, or either it could be an athlete who is placing bets on his own events against himself, and then we can follow up these cases, again, from a perspective of international sports, using the code as I alluded to before. On the right side, you see something. I want to only talk a sentence now here, because Benjamin, as I understand from FIBA, will talk a little bit about this. We are, of course, as the catalyst for the Olympic movement, giving support towards investigations if they should be necessary about any alerts, any reports, anything that we are giving forward to the international federations, because most of these reports and alerts will happen not at the Olympic Games or Youth Olympic Games, and those are the IOC events where we have jurisdiction, but those will be world championships, maybe national leagues, and we have to have a concerted approach towards these entities who have jurisdiction. Next slide, please. This is yes.
I think we can see all those terrible betting companies there. I think can I stop you there, because we're running short of time.